An afternoon game to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't play out the way Miami would have liked it. A true tale of two halves as Miami was blown out early and down by 26, only to mount an incredible comeback that fell just short against the Atlanta Hawks after three straight wins and now a loss. Are there encouraging signs that we can take from today's game? We break down what went wrong, who's to blame, and answer your questions on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your Monday to Friday podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or wherever you get your podcasts, thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Tough loss for the Heat. They lose to the Hawks 121-113 on a Monday afternoon. They deserve credit for fighting back from 26 points down after Atlanta's hot early shooting. Jimmy Butler scored 34 points. Bam finished with 20, 13, and 5 to go along with 3 steals and 3 blocks to make it a 5-point game late, but mistakes ultimately cost them this one, namely giving up a DeJounte Murray three-pointer, a blown defensive assignment led to a Clint Capella alley-oop, and then a 5-second violation cost them a possession. A tough loss, considering that in the end, the Heat had a chance to get a solid win during what has been an otherwise soft stretch in the schedule. Not so much a statement win or an opportunity for a statement win, David, but the Hawks are right there in the play-in tournament, right there with the Miami Heat. What do you think went wrong in this one?
Well, it was obviously allowing that early blowout. You can't expect a comeback, even in today's game. Obviously, we know, as Eric Spoelstra is fond of saying, the three-point shot, the great equalizer. You can close a gap like this pretty quickly in the league if everybody starts knocking down those shots. But they just built such an insurmountable hole that it was too much for them to overcome. And I think a lot of that was due to matchups. You saw some players that struggled that have stepped up of late. Gabe Vincent, Victor Oladipo, Tyler Herro struggled in the first half. That came around eventually to knock down some big shots, necessary shots, but by then it was too little too late. I just think they weren't taking advantage of Gabe Vincent. They weren't utilizing him in a way. I think the Hawks, you have to give them credit, did a good job of limiting what Vincent could do. It's not to put it on him specifically, but we've seen so much of their pick and roll action thrive in that sense with Vincent, and they did such a good job of putting the clamps on him and limiting his open looks that they kind of just put them in a tough spot. It was most effective, as we saw, when Jimmy had the ball in his hands and just let him go to work. That's the only offense. Converse, it was a sharp contrast from what we saw against the Milwaukee Bucks when it was the fluidity of that offense that looked best. And when Jimmy had the ball in his hands, that's when the offense struggled most. Today was the only time it was really effective was when Jimmy was dominating, getting downhill, getting to the line, drawing contact, etc. And when they were trying to recreate what they did so well against Milwaukee with Gabe as the point guard or Oladipo with the ball in his hands, it just didn't work. So you have to give credit. They did a pretty good job of switching in just the right way. Shagging off a little bit from the ball handler and making sure that whenever they tried to penetrate, that they would break up the pass, leading to a turnover. A lot of turnovers early on, really, really sloppy look. And then just sloppy defensive plays on the top of that, too. I can't recall the number of times. I think it was like 4 in total that they fouled a three-point shooter in the act of shooting or after the shot had been released, including that DeJounte Murray shot that you referenced. So just not a very Miami Heat-like game, considering what we've seen from them of late. It was definitely a step back, even if there were encouraging signs to take away from this.
Yeah, I just wonder how sort of this early matinee timing impacted their rhythm. No shoot around, nothing like that.
Yeah,
the Hawks are playing really well. They're on a 3-game win streak. They're right there in the play-in mix, kind of similar to Miami, in that it kind of feels like they're starting to figure out their own thing, right? Their ball movement has been much better the last couple of weeks, and all these things. They're starting to figure out some stuff despite some of that early season drama that they were dealing with. Same thing with Miami, right? You're getting guys back. Worth mentioning, Caleb Martin and Tyler Herro back in the lineup tonight. Still no Kyle Lowry, which we'll touch upon that in a little bit here, but mostly a healthy squad. I agree with you. The matchup thing was a little different versus what we just saw against a Milwaukee Bucks team that was without Giannis, where that really, and without Chris Middleton. So I thought, even though the Bucks still had quite a bit of size and the Heat really couldn't go bully ball, their perimeter play was sort of their advantage in that Milwaukee series, where this game against Atlanta, it was like Atlanta's small. The playbook has been out there. The blueprint to beat the Hawks has been out there for a long time now. Get their smaller guards, especially Trae Young, in the switch, and then just punish them in the post. And that's why you saw Jimmy Butler score 34 points on 16 shots tonight and go 11-11 from the line. That's how you beat the Atlanta Hawks, right? And so I actually thought game plan wise, they did a good job. I don't know that I really expected Gabe Vincent, to your point, to even have a big game in this matchup. I thought Tyler Herro would be a little bit better. He had some shots late, but he had 15 points on 16 shots. His first game back in a while, so maybe knocking off some rust should be expected there. But ultimately, it was Jimmy and then Bam kind of doing their bully ball thing against Atlanta, and they got going in the second half. But the thing is, I don't know how much there is to even read into this, honestly. Like, the Hawks couldn't miss a shot to start the game. They ended up shooting 48% from three. Most of those were done in the first and second quarter. And when you kind of get dug into a 26-point hole, it's just really hard to climb back from that, especially when you're the Heat. And I think they went 1 of 9 to start the game. They ended up making like 8 straight shots or 9 straight shots, something like that. But they had a really hard time at the beginning of the game. And by then, you hate to say that it was already over, and certainly it wasn't, given that the Heat got it back into, turned it into a clutch game, a 5-point game late. But it's just really hard to claw back, especially when offensively you're not all that potent to begin with. Again, Hawks shot 48% from three. The Heat shot 25.8%. They made just 8 of 31 of their threes. It seems simplistic, but that might have been the game. And by the way, I thought that the Heat didn't do a great job of navigating the screens and stuff like that and contesting a lot of threes, but I didn't think they did a really poor job either. Like, that late DeJounte Murray three was well defended. He just made the shot, right? He got fouled. He didn't convert on the free throw to make it a 4-point play. But given that he was contested so close that he ended up getting fouled, it wasn't like he was wide open, I guess is my point. I didn't think a lot of the threes were wide open for Atlanta, right? They just made a bunch of shots today.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Like a lot of shots in the first half that it seems like they just wouldn't miss. Like, they were
DeJounte Murray, 5 of 8, 62.5% on threes. That's not what DeJounte Murray does, but he did it today.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they shot 67% in the first half from three. Miami conversely shot 25%. That was the tail of the first half, right? It was one team was making 3-point shots, the other team wasn't. And you could expect that, right? I mean, how much of that can you chalk up to the rush of incorporating 2 starters that had missed a combined 8 games?
None. Zero. No, because the Heat never shoot like that. Rusty or not rusty. They don't shoot 67% in the first half or 48% for a game. The Heat are not a good 3-point shooting team this year. The Hawks got hot. Like, I don't know that we could have expected the Heat to shoot better. I mean, they shot 25.8%. I guess they could have shot closer to their average, which has been around 33%. Is that enough to win this game? Maybe. If anything, I think they just didn't get to the bully ball stuff soon enough in this game. They didn't. They early on, it was a lot of Tyler Herro running pick and roll. They kind of just went back to their standard offense. It's hard to say you would have liked to see more from Jimmy Butler, considering that he scored 34 points. But I actually would have just liked to see a little bit more stuff early on. Yeah, it wasn't really his game. I don't know. I also say this. I thought they were
trying to make Tyler get him going early on, right? Like, that was,
and I'm okay with that, considering they came back. And I kind of liked the looks in the first half. They just weren't making shots. I hate, again, I know we're supposed to bring more analysis to this show, but sometimes in the NBA, it's just sometimes you just don't make the shots, and the other team just makes a lot of theirs, and that kind of feels like what this one was to me.
Was this more problematic from an offensive standpoint or a defensive standpoint? I have to say, despite giving up 70 points in the first half, the fact that their offense was so shaky, I think if they had just been a little bit better knocking down those shots, or if Tyler might have been going a little bit earlier on in terms of getting his offense going, they would have eventually done a better job, because we saw their defense improve, and their defense, as it has throughout this whole season and has for several years with Jimmy Butler at the team's helm, it fuels their offense. They get the fast break going, they get transition baskets, they get better looks, they get fouled in transition, et cetera. That's where they were very, very effective in the second half, not so much in the first half. So I tend to look at it more as they blew some things defensively.
No, I don't know. They got 10 steals in this game, 4 blocks. A lot of that stuff fed their offense. I still just, like, this is a team that has had a really hard time making shots for consistent stretches, and I'll default back to that. 113 points seems like a lot, but against the Atlanta Hawks in today's NBA, it's really not that much, you know?
Right.
And to give up 121 points to the Hawks doesn't look great. A lot of that was at the free throw line for Atlanta. I don't think it was their best defensive performance, but again, like I thought Atlanta made a lot of tough looks, you know, in this one too. So I don't know. I think they made more shots than the Heat did. We will get to Blame Pie here next, but first let's hear from our sponsor.
Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, daily fantasy made easy. It's just basically you against the projected numbers. That's how simple it is. That's why PrizePicks is for everybody. If you haven't tried it, do yourself a favor. It's easy to play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. And this is how it works. You just basically pick 2 to 6 players, and if they will score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 25 times your money on any single entry. No competing against other people. So it's just you versus the straight projected numbers. And PrizePicks offers projections in any sport that you watch, including the NBA, of course, the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NHL, college football, college men's basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, cricket, disc golf, you name it, PrizePicks has you covered. Entries can be made in under a minute, safe and fast withdrawals, and are currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up today and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50 back. So don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up for an instant deposit match of up to $100 by downloading the PrizePicks app or going to prizepicks.com.
Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen. That smelly smell, there's the smell of another smelly loss. It's time, David, to hand out some Blame Pie.
Been a while, you know. I'm not sure. I don't like the kitchen stinking up this way, you know.
Can I go back to something I said at the beginning of the show? Because you just said it has been a while. The Heat going into this game, winning 12 of their last 17 games, feeling good stretch of games. You're beating the teams in front of you, but like I outlined after that last Milwaukee win, two wins against the Bucks who were without Giannis and without Chris Middleton. You kind of go down this entire this last stretch, and a lot of wins against injured, easy opponent. I'll say it hasn't been the toughest competition for the Heat. They finally get a chance to play a basically fully healthy Atlanta Hawks team who are welcoming back Clint Capella, who played 20 minutes off the bench for them tonight. Do you read anything into that? The fact that No, I don't. Now, the Hawks have always been a matchup problem. And when you look at this team again, this iteration of the Heat team with Jimmy Butler as its core, basically, has always had a problem with these kind of fast-paced athletic teams. That certainly looked the case in the first half. They didn't have a problem against these Hawks in the playoffs in April. No, because again, they went early on to Jimmy Butler, and the game slows down, period, in the playoffs, and it plays better to Miami's strengths, to Jimmy Butler's individual greatness and things of that sort. I think that's the key there. And they did a much better job, I think, of pressuring Trae Young in the second half and doing so what they did in the playoffs. You know, he was getting too many looks in the first half because, you know, as dangerous as he can be with his shooting, he's probably even more dangerous with his passing. He had that lob to Capella late. That was problematic. And I think you started to see them realize, well, that we had the game plan of how to beat this team with Trae Young there. So I think they did not go to it early enough, but I think it was, I don't know. I just don't see this as a bad loss. I know a lot of Heat fans will be disappointed. I'm with you. And I understand that perspective too, because the fact that they did get so close and fall short kind of feels like, well, what was the point, right? You just exerted all this energy for nothing. But at the same time, I think it did show that when their strengths are there, as they were in the second half, they looked dominant. Like their defense to offense was as great as we've seen from this team, reminiscent almost of the big three in many ways, like just turning the ball over, getting to their shots, knocking down shots. Jimmy Butler dialed up. Bam was electric in the second half. It was really, really fun to watch. I can't feel too disappointed in this loss, although I can understand the perspective of those who are. Yeah, I mean, you lose. Like, I understand anybody's disappointed after a loss. I'm sure the Heat are disappointed. I'm with you, though. I think that this is just one of those games over the course of regular season that you chalk up to the Hawks just not being able to miss a shot and the Heat having a hard time making their own shots. And in today's NBA, where the three ball is so important and creates so much variance, sometimes that's just what it looks like. But to your point, Miami outscored Atlanta by 12 points in the second half, and they looked really good. And like I said, the Hawks are a team that's coming along. This is not the same drama-filled Hawks team that just couldn't get out of their own way the way that they were earlier in the season. That said, we do need to hand out bland pie because that's what we do after losses. And I do think that we need to start with just the question about whether or not we give any to Victor Oladipo, because I didn't think it was a bad Victor Oladipo game necessarily, but that 5-second violation at the end of the game there, the Heat down by 2 possessions, not a lot of time left, about half a minute left in the game, but you get the inbound in, maybe you make a shot, let's call it a 3-pointer, and then you're playing the foul game a little bit. It's a 1-possession game. Maybe you're able to force a turnover on the inbound or something like that. We had just seen them force a turnover by trapping Trae Young a possession before that. So does Victor Oladipo get blame pie just because of that 5-second violation, the inability to get the inbound in there?
Not just because of that. I think there were other miscues throughout the game, trying to force those passes early, like when he was getting into that pick and roll or driving to the rim and looking for cutters. He forced a couple turnovers that way. He fouled another 3-point shooter, something that I referred to earlier on. Also missing all of his 3-point attempts. Like
0 for 4.
I know. Yeah, I know they're not necessarily relying on Victor Oladipo. I talked after last game against the Bucks on Saturday that the bench seems to be one of their great strengths now moving forward, because you're getting Gabe Vincent, you're getting Tyler Herro back, et cetera. Like, you know what you're going to get in terms of like this good starting lineup. And now all of a sudden you have these reserve players stepping up and finding their roles more comfortably. And while you don't want to say you're relying on Victor Oladipo's offense, you can't have him be a negative out there. You can't have him missing every shot and then not doing things to balance out some production level on offense. Like, he just has to score more. He has to be more effective as a scorer, because they need that from him. And we've seen that from him of late. So tough one from him. I'm comfortable giving him, if not at least 1 slice, maybe even 2 slices of blame pie.
I think 2 is fine. 3 of 8, 0-4 overall. Did have 10 assists in the game. He was a big playmaker for the team off the bench. But I don't think defensively he was where you wanted him to be.
For Caleb Martin, who was in foul trouble, we should point out maybe he was slightly out of rhythm. I don't want to say that played a factor. Again, you're already playing at 3:30, going in at 3:45 is checking in at 3:53 shouldn't make much of a difference. I don't know if it.
No, I don't know. I'm okay with 1 or 2 slices for Oladipo. I think we need to talk about the bench though in general, which Oladipo was a part of. The bench is what lost the Heat the game tonight. Jimmy Butler was a +4. Caleb Martin was a +3. Bam Adebayo was a +6. Tyler Herro, I'd be willing to give him a slice of blame pie, but he was at least a +5. And he made those shots. He made the big 3-pointer late and a floater to make it a 2-possession game late in that one. Still went 1 of 8. I don't know. Do we give Tyler Herro a slice just because he did? Like, if you're looking for somebody to be a shooter, Tyler Herro is the shooter on this team, and he only went 1 of 8 from 3-point range.
It's rough. It's a tough question, and I understand why.
And he's coming back from like a week of absence.
He was noticeably rusty, and at the same time, like, you could see them getting into their sets there. The patience from Tyler as a playmaker, leading the player on defensively, and then being able to create an open look for a teammate. He had a couple turnovers too. The timing wasn't quite perfect yet with either Jimmy or Bam early on, and of course then with his shots not falling, he's not really as much of a factor as he potentially could be. So you balance that out by the fact that he's also rusty, and yet he didn't score enough. He did not hit down his shots early on, which is what they need him to. So a slice,
1,
maybe 2.
I'm good with it. I'm one for Herro, giving him the benefit of the doubt for rust. I think that's fair. Let's talk about the bench, because I mentioned the plus minus there in the starting lineup. Again, the Heat winning this game when the starters were in there. The bench is what cost them this game. Gabe Vincent was a -8. Victor Oladipo was -10. Orlando Robinson, rough day for him, -14. And Atlanta is, by the way, they have 2 starting caliber centers between Onyeka Okongwu and Clint Capella. So asking Orlando Robinson to basically go in there and match up with Clint Capella, who's coming off the bench for Atlanta tonight, that's a tough assignment. That said, he was still at -14 and really didn't do much. Had 1 rebound the entire game. Missed the only shot he took. Was a non-factor. And then
I hate to say it, this might have been a good Dwayne Dedmon game.
Maybe. And then Max Strus was.
You want to consider it?
I mean, it's a hypothetical. We could discuss whether, and I don't think the Heat win this game if Dwayne Dedmon is playing. I'll put it that way. I don't think it makes that much of a difference, but I don't know. We could have the Eric Spoelstra conversation too, because Dwayne Dedmon's sitting there healthy, relatively healthy, available at least. Yeah. But just to finish up the bench thought here, Max Strus was a -18, Haywood Highsmith was a -8. So there's the game right there. The bench just couldn't do anything, could not make a shot. I think off the bench, Victor Oladipo was 3 of 8. Orlando Robinson was 0 of 1. Strus was 3 of 9. Haywood was 3 of 5. He was the best, at least percentage-wise, off the bench, but wasn't very good defensively. I think Max Strus got destroyed defensively tonight. Gabe Vincent, I didn't think had his strongest game defensively.
No, not a good matchup.
When you're looking at players who didn't do their job navigating all the screens that Atlanta is going to set and all these things, I think it was the players that were just meant that I just listed. They gave up a lot, I thought, defensively in a way that the starters weren't really.
For all of his lack of size, and Vincent, like he probably, like Kyle Lowry, is a little bit better playing guards that are bigger than he is because he's just so physical, and you just can't afford that level of physicality with a player like Trae Young, who's going to stop at a dime to force a foul call or just, act in a way when he's putting up a shot that's going to look like a foul, et cetera. Like there was probably more contact that should have been allowed anyway. So, I mean, he might have gotten a call regardless, but against a player like Trae Young, who does get to the line so much, who does depend on the whistle so much in order to be effective, it's just not a good matchup for Vincent, who does play larger than his physical size and is just better being able to hold his own and switch onto bigger guards. I think, like you saw that matchup against Drew Holiday, like he was able to at least try to be a certain level of physicality, match that level of physicality with a much bigger player in Holiday against Young, basically the similar size as Gabe Vincent and a little bit quicker, just not a very good one.
So we've got two blame pie slices to Oladipo, 1 to Tyler Herro. That means we're going to give 2 to Gabe, 2 to Max, and 2 to Orlando Robinson. We have 1 slice left over. Does that go to Gabe Vincent, make it 3 for him, or Max Strus, do you think?
I think you said 2 to Gabe Vincent already.
Do we make it 3 is my point.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, let's do it.
That's all 10. All right. That'll do it for Blame Pie. We got questions from you guys, the listeners, coming up next. Did the Heat miss Kyle Lowry in this game, considering that Gabe Vincent just got 3 slices of Blame Pie? Maybe they did. We'll talk about that next. But David, tell the listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and calories? Then you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know a lot of people have made resolutions for the new year of trying to eat a little healthier. Well, guess what? You got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious. You won't think they're good for you, but they're perfect for your New Year's resolution. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond, Wes's favorite. I'm not sure how Built does it, but those bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they're healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars only at Built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in, grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie, batter, and churro. You can thank me later. Make sure to go to Built.com as well.
Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, email us lockedonheat@gmail.com. You can send in your questions for our postgame shows using the hashtag AskLOHeat. This first question comes from Michael, who writes in, did Spo wait too long to bring Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler back into the game in the fourth quarter? So some context here. Jimmy Butler rests the first half of the fourth quarter, as he usually does. Didn't check in until about 7.5 minutes left in the game. At that point, the Heat had cut the Hawks at one point 26-point lead down to single digits. It was 9, it was 10, it was 11. It was sort of hovering around there. Jimmy Butler comes back in. Then, as soon as Jimmy comes in at 7.5 minutes, Bam comes out, and he comes out for 2 minutes. In those 2 minutes, the Hawks go on a 7-0 run to turn what was a 9-point lead for Atlanta into a 15-point lead with 5.5 minutes to go in the game. Okay, so Jimmy Butler overall played, what was it, 33 minutes in this game? 34 minutes. 34 minutes for Jimmy Butler, 36 minutes for Bam Adebayo. Orlando Robinson only played 12 minutes off the bench. It didn't feel like they leaned on the bench that much, but I do believe this is a fair question, considering that, hey, you're the Miami Heat. You're clinging for playing for a spot in the play-in tournament, hopefully trying to get out of that play-in tournament and get a top 6 seed. All these games matter, especially against another playoff type team in the Atlanta Hawks. These head-to-head matchups really matter in terms of the standings. So,
yeah,
was there maybe is there a point in this question saying, hey, like I understand it's only January, but this is a chance to get a much-needed win still and keep the good times rolling. Maybe put Jimmy Butler in there a minute earlier. Maybe not take Bam out for a couple of minutes for Orlando Robinson and allow the Hawks to go on a 7-0 run there. Like, what do you think about this?
It's an interesting question. And I can see why the debate is an important one, because you're right. Like, these games all do matter. You could have gone 5 games over 500. You can continue building and showing an Eastern Conference opponent that, you know, you might be jockeying for position at some point. You want to keep trying to build as much victories, as many victories as you possibly can against Eastern Conference opponents. So I totally understand that. But I do see the point of, one, you don't want to necessarily overexert your players and play them for long stretches at a time in an early January game. We've seen Jimmy Butler miss time. We've seen Bam miss time. So you want to continue to force them out there when you can go to other players. And that's the whole thing too, is, again, the bench has been a strength. These reserves have been typically better of late. And so you trust that they can do a better job. You hope that they can.
That's the balance that a head coach has to pull, right? Like, you want to show and you want to trust your bench, right? In these stretches, you also want to manage those minutes especially during the course of a long regular season. And so you have to, it's tough. I know every fan just wants, hey, why aren't your best players playing all 12 minutes in the fourth quarter? It's like, okay, well, do you want them to come out for the entire third quarter? Like, you have to, you can't just play everybody for all 12 minutes in the fourth quarter every single time you're in a close game, especially considering that the Heat have been in more close games than any team in the NBA this year. We're talking about 30 close games. So what? You're just going to play your best Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo every minute of the fourth quarter for 30 games this season? Like, that's just not manageable. That said, and this was a big trending topic on Twitter, whatever that's worth, while Jimmy Butler was sitting out for the first, 6 minutes of that fourth quarter, people were like, get Jimmy in there, get Jimmy in there, get Jimmy in there. And I was like, you know what? I'm okay with him sitting for a little bit, considering where this game was headed and how much work Jimmy Butler had to do every offensive possession, because it was, again, him just hunting out the mismatches, getting the switch, and then getting into the post. Yeah, I kind of did want him fresh, and I thought 7.5 minutes, you get him in there right around his normal time, that's enough time, as long as it's within 10 points. 7.5 minutes is a long time. I didn't have a problem with that. I didn't love Bam. I didn't love Bam coming out for 2 minutes.
Yeah,
and I would like to know the decision making. So bad?
Is that because Orlando was such a big difference? Like,
yes, Orlando Robinson wasn't good tonight. He got 2 slices of blame pie and he deserved it. But also Bam was awesome. Like, and the offense was flowing when Bam was the hub of the offense, as he always is. Like, this is the problem when you have a great player like Bam Adebayo and you take him out. And if he's in a flow and you take him out, nobody can replace what it is that Bam Adebayo does, right? Not on this roster or any roster. Like, Bam is one of a kind. So when you take him out, the way that he was playing, and the fact that Orlando Robinson wasn't contributing anything, and you weren't gonna put Dwayne Dedmon into this game, and I don't know that it would have mattered. I tweeted this in the third quarter. I said, I don't know that Bam can come out for the rest of this game, and he came out for 2 minutes. It shouldn't be that big of a deal to come out for 2 minutes. But he came out for a minute, went to the scores table, sat at the scores table for a minute, and in those 2 minutes, the Hawks went on a 7-0 run, and like I said, it turned to what was a 9-point game into a 15-point game. Who knows? The Heat might have been able to steal this one if Bam doesn't come out. I would like to know the decision-making process behind it. Was it Spo just trying to bank Bam a breather here for a couple minutes, or was it Bam looking at the sideline saying, "Hey, I need a couple of minutes. I need to catch my breath for a second so that I can come back in"? I don't know. I have no idea what the decision was behind that, but regardless of what it was, I didn't like that he rested those 2 minutes. And I thought it could have cost the Heat the game tonight.
Look, on the flip side of that, can we just look at it from a positive perspective, how great Bam's game was? Like, that he was 9 of 19. Again, we're talking 19 field goal attempts. Like, at the start of the season, we didn't even think he'd ever get to a point where he would be comfortably taking 18 plus field goals per game.
He was talking about his goal being 18 shots a game.
That's right. It was 15. It was like, that was the goal set for him. And he was like, no, I'm going to exceed that. It's like, okay, we'll believe it when we see it. Here he is taking 19 shots, 3 blocks, active on defense, doing everything he possibly can. Awesome. 13 rebounds.
That third quarter was really incredible.
Really good game.
Like if anybody anybody watching this is a Bam believer, because you're watching this at 30-minute mark of the podcast, so I'm sure you're bought into Bam already. But if whatever reason you're watching this and you're not bought into Bam, just watch the third quarter of this game. I know the Heat lost. I don't even care. That'll make you a believer.
Interesting question, obviously, because you're Reggie Miller and the Kevin Harlan talking about Jimmy Butler being a deserving all-star after he puts on this monster performance in a nationally televised game on a holiday, no less. And yet Bam comes up with a very big game, an all-around game. Like, this is perfectly synonymous of who, Bam Adebayo is as a player. And I don't know that he's going to get the light. One, it's a loss. And two, like, his numbers just weren't as gaudy as Jimmy. So I wonder, like, we're talking about, like, we're a couple days removed from the Miami-Dade County Arena, announcer saying Bam for All-Star game.
Yeah. This was an all-star performance. I mean, he scored what was it? He scored 20 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, 3 blocks. I don't think anybody actually watching this. I give more credit to voters not thinking that, hey, you don't have to just score 30 or 40 points in order to get an all-star nod. If you actually watched this game, it was inescapable that Bam had such an influence on it. I do. I'm not saying every voter, but I think that people who watch basketball, you've got to, like, if you watched this game, it's impossible to come away from this game and think that Bam had anything other than an all-star caliber performance. If you watched the game, I'm saying, not people that just look at the box score after. Let's get to our final question because we're going long here. Alfonso writes in, did the Heat miss Kyle Lowry tonight? I'm just going to say something really quick. It's impossible to know whether or not the Heat would have won this game with Kyle Lowry, but I will say this. Back to something I said before, I thought that the screen navigation by Gabe Vincent and Max Strus and a little even Caleb Martin was not where you wanted it to be tonight. Kyle Lowry is good at navigating those screens. He is very good at closing out, knowing where the offense is going to go. The Hawks offense is not an easy one to guard. It's not as predictable as it was. They've been a lot better. DeJounte Murray being more of a factor more recently. And so I think Kyle Lowry would have been very helpful in this game. Again, did the Heat win this without Kyle Lowry? I don't know. Did they miss him, though? Because that's not the question. Would they have won it with Kyle? That's not the question. Did they miss Kyle Lowry tonight? I think they did. I think that's fair. I think that's inarguable.
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, who knows what Gabe's role would have looked like off the bench had Kyle been starting. So, I mean, the defensive perspective you just mentioned too, like, this is a game where Lowry's defense, his style of play would have been much more effective, I think, than what we saw from Gabe Vincent. Maybe not so much against Milwaukee, but against the Atlanta Hawks, much more better suited. And
it's not even 1-for-1. I know we want to focus on, is it Gabe or is it Kyle Lowry? But let's just say, like, Max Strus had a rough night tonight too. Like, instead of having to play him 28 minutes, if you've got Kyle Lowry in there and you're able to play Gabe Vincent a little bit, now you're able to sort of redistribute those Max Strus minutes to guys who might have been a little bit more effective. I don't know, but Gabe Vincent also had a rough shooting night. 4 of 10 for him, 2 of 7 from three-point range. Who knows? Maybe Lowry would have been better. Did they miss him? Yeah, they missed him. I don't know if that would have made the difference, but they missed him. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Ring the bell to get notified as soon as new episodes go up. Now, make your second listen game-to-game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining me, David.
You got it, Wes.